Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Pat Higgins. I'm the president and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Civil Discourse Series program. I'd like to start by extending a special thank you to our presenting sponsor for this series, the Meadows Foundation. We are so grateful for their support of the Civil Discourse series and making this important work possible for us. I'd also like to thank our community partners, the Anti-Defamation League, Texoma, Green Hills School, Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas, Southwest Jewish Congress, Temple Emmanuel, and Temple Shalom. We are very grateful for your support and helping us get the word out to fulfill our mission. And as always, I'd like to thank our museum board members, our members and volunteers, and our generations members who are here tonight. We couldn't do this work without you. If you are not engaged with the museum and would like to get engaged, we'd love to have you. Please become a member. Go to our website and look at volunteer opportunities. There's so much work to be done to accomplish our mission. So the goal of the Civil Discourse series is to present multiple sides of a thought-provoking topic through respectful discussion, something that we're not very good at these days. We see our role in the community not only as an educator, but as a convener, serving as a place where we can gather to learn from one another. Tonight, we are joined by a panel of representatives from Sharaka, a partnership of young leaders including Israelis, Arabs, Jews, Muslims, Christians, and Druze, working to shape a new Middle East built on dialogue, understanding, cooperation, and friendship, the very definition of civil discourse. At the end of our panel discussion, we will leave a few minutes for questions and answers. If you're with us in person, please write your questions on the note cards that we passed out, and our staff will come around and pick them up, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. And now I ask you to silence your cell phones and electronic devices so that we may listen to our panelists without disruption. I'd also like to ask you to please refrain from clapping, booing, surely no one's going to boo tonight, or whispering to each other during the program. This is an admonishment that we always give in civil discourse because sometimes it's hard to hear differing opinions. I think you'll find this group is very much aligned, and they've already worked through and are really pros at having civil discourse. It's now my pleasure to introduce the evening's moderator, Elisa Anis. Elisa serves as Sharaka's Holocaust Program Coordinator, leading groundbreaking historical education projects aimed at fostering dialogue and understanding in the Arab and Muslim world. And now I will turn it over to Elisa to introduce.
First of all, thank you so much for coming this evening. I'm so honored to be here. We've had 10 days in Texas in which the weather has dropped 20 degrees Celsius, but it has been such a delight and everyone has been so welcoming, so I really appreciate you all for coming this evening. Sharaka was established right after the Abraham Accords. You know, the countries from Bahrain, UAE, Morocco, to some extent Sudan, and Israel signed this agreement, this historic agreement, and it was a signature between the governments. And Sharaka really stepped in to make the signature between the governments a movement that creates people-to-people diplomacy, that connects connections between myself, a Jew living in Israel, and someone like Fatma, a Muslim living in Bahrain. We never thought we'd have the opportunity to meet each other, to get to know each other, and to break the stereotypes that exist in our region. You know, we've for so long grown up that you can't have conversations, that because we're in the Middle East, it's a conflict zone, and that peace can't happen. And yet Sharaka stepped in to bring delegations of Muslims from the Middle East to Israel, of Jews and Arabs and Palestinians from Israel to the Middle East, and mixed delegations together to Poland and Germany to learn about the Holocaust. Sharaka for me is the hope that every single one of us need in the world. Because in a world that's so dark, that we turn on the news and we see so much conflict, so much darkness, Sharaka brings the light. And we really appreciate you all for coming to share this light with us and hopefully to share it onwards as well after. So I want each of our panelists over here to introduce themselves very briefly before we lead into the panel.
Good evening, y'all. I'm trying my Texan accent. Is it working? So my name is Jonathan Al-Khouri. I'm a Lebanese Israeli Christian. I'm, you can say my title, a refugee, part of the LGBTQ plus community. But today I'm a commentator, mainly on public affairs of Israel and the Arab world, an analyst about what's going on in Lebanon, and also an advocate for Israel for the last, you can say, decade, going to educate people about my life as a non-Jew living in the Israeli Jewish and democratic state.
Hello everyone. Hello everyone. My name is Fatima Al-Harbi. I am from Bahrain. I'm honored to be here with you all today. I'm an author with 5 published novels I write love stories that discuss women issues that I care about, like mental health and women empowerment. I'm also an athletics champion. I still hold the record in long and triple jump in Bahrain and the Gulf area. And I'm Gulf Affairs Director with Sharaka, and I've been honored to be nominated European Commission Peace Ambassador. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rashid Montasir. I'm Moroccan Muslim and an activist / troublemaker. I get addicted to be in one table with a Jew, Christian, and Muslims. So I don't know how I'm gonna imagine myself tomorrow, but all what I do is reflect what I carried in my heart in that beautiful Holy Land, Israel, back to Morocco.
Howdy, everyone. That was a bit more Texan. Johnny, you need to learn. My name is Noah Meirov. I'm the managing director of this wonderful organization. Before that, until 2 years ago, I was an officer in the IDF, and in the last 2 years, I had the pleasure to do business with the Abraham Accord countries and with Arab communities inside Israel. But now I have the pleasure to sit here.
What a pleasure it really is to be here. I just want to start with Fatima and Rashid. And I really want to start to underpin what the Abraham Accords was and what it meant for your countries to sign this historic agreement. So can you please share with us why you believe your countries signed the agreement and the impact it made to your personal lives and to your journey to then joining Sharaka?
Sure. I think coming from Bahrain, I always consider myself one of the lucky ones. Growing up in Bahrain, it's a small island in the middle of the Arab world. It's only half an hour drive to Saudi Arabia. We grew up in a country that has all religions. We have, of course, it's a Muslim country, Muslim Arab country, but we have Bahraini Jews and Bahraini Christians. So we grew up seeing a synagogue in the middle of the souk, in the old market of Manama, which doesn't require any security, unlike other countries. And also we have the biggest church in the Arabian Gulf. So I grew up in a country that had so much religion, different religions, people, the foreigners that lives in Bahrain practice even more religions like Buddhist. And our leadership have always embraced that in the country. And even the leadership themselves celebrate each religion's holidays in Bahrain. So I grew up in a country that embraces coexistence, peaceful community. So it wasn't a surprise when Bahrain decided to sign the Abraham Accord. But I think there is so much more factors that pushed Bahrain to sign the accords. One of them, of course, is the security factor. We all share the same enemy. It's only across the sea from Bahrain, which is Iran. It affects all countries next to it, and of course, proxies in so much more countries. Of course, also the economical factor. There is so much more benefits in that. But for me, coming from Bahrain, I've always been curious to know the unknown. Israel have always been the unknown to us. I only know about Israel from the media. And of course, Al Jazeera channel, the most watched channel, and all they show is propaganda. And now I know more because they even showed propaganda about me. So I'm positive 100% it's full of propaganda. So I only know about Israel as the evil figure in the Middle East, or the enemy, or the country that it's full of Jews that hate Muslims, and we're supposed to hate them because they're Jews in that land. But when Sharaka was established after the Abraham Accord, they invited me, and I immediately got the honor of becoming the first citizen to go visit Israel. I thank COVID for that. No one was traveling and no visas yet, no direct flights. But the moment we landed and went to Tel Aviv, I wanted to explore the area. I wanted to meet people. My only agenda, my special agenda, was meeting people, tasting the food. Because the moment we went there, everyone kept saying, you have to taste the hummus. It's better than your hummus. And I'll be honest, it's way better. Don't taste the hummus in Bahrain. But the moment we went to Tel Aviv, exploring the area, a complete stranger came running to me and said, excuse me, can I ask you a question? And I thought something hateful coming on the way, because it's Israel in my mind. But he came and said, where are you from? Are you from Bahrain or Dubai? He knew immediately because of the fuss and the news in the media about the Abraham Accord. So I answered Bahrain, and my friend said Dubai, Abu Dhabi. And he said, welcome. We've been waiting to have peace with Arabs for a long time. If you tell me this 10 years ago, I wouldn't believe you. But that was the reality. People welcomed me with open arms and were so happy seeing me there as an Arab and Muslim, and a person coming from the Middle East. And I met Israeli Arabs, Jews, Christians, Palestinians. They all shared one message that we don't get to hear back home, which is, we want peace. And that narrative, we don't get to hear it back home. I found myself going on a tourist visit, but came back with a message that I actually want to advocate for peace and become a voice of peace and bridge between my community and the people in Israel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Rashid, please, can you share with us your story and what you believe the impact, of the Abraham Accords with Morocco had to your life, and why you think the agreement happened in the first place?
Well, thank you, Alisa. And before talking about Abraham Accord, I have to say that before Abraham Accord, and according to my friends in Morocco, most of my friends, I was very Muslim. But after Abraham Accord, shwiya Muslim, a little bit. And I said that, and when I said earlier that I'm a troublemaker, I mean it. And I have to add to it that I was also spoiled when I was a kid, because I grew up in a huge family in Morocco. My father had 3 wives at the same time, and I have 24 siblings. Only. I mentioned that just because when I was a kid, and I was, of course, number 25, so imagine, very spoiled, I had the right to ask a lot of questions to my father, except why he married 3 wives, or what's going on in Israel. Unfortunately, I couldn't ask that question simply because the media injected negativity and hate in hearts, including my generation heart. And I grew up in a big family that I couldn't ask that question just because being in a bubble of hate, it couldn't give me the courage to ask and be curious. So growing up in Morocco, moving from a city to another, I see synagogues. I'm talking about 700 years old places, Jewish places, and saints, Jewish saints, where Moroccan Muslims and Jews used to go and ask for blessings. Now, the question came to my mind, since the Israeli Jews are killers, so what's the difference between the Israeli Jews and the Moroccan Jews? And I kept asking that questions a lot. Unfortunately, I didn't get a clear answer. Now, not only that, but taking me back to, we call our grandfather, the King Mohammed V. the grandfather of the current king, His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, when he was asked by the Nazis to deliver the Moroccan Jews, what he said that those not Jews, those are Moroccans. Now, if you're talking and you want the Jews, we don't have Jews, but we have Moroccans before Muslims and before the Jews. Now, only that can, of course, respond to part of my question. What is the difference between the Moroccan Jews and Israeli Jews? But now, I would say that my father had 3 wives, but I had 4 moms. I had a mom that I called the first time when Sharaka invited me to go to Israel, and I told her, Mom, I'm going to Israel. And she said, are you out of your mind? Are you crazy? You're going to be killed. And of course, she cares about me. She's my mom. And Sharaka wants me to be Israel. Sharaka wants me to be and seeing the reality and witnessing the truth. And Sharaka is also my mom because she cares about that. And now, going to Israel the first time, I'm not going to lie. The first time I stepped out from the airport, it takes me way back in the past when my model as a Muslim, the Prophet Muhammad, lived with a Jew together in peace and harmony. And touching the wall of Jerusalem speaks loudly the peace and harmony. And that is reflected on every Israeli, whether my generation, all generation, or kids. My eye was open when I discussed with my Israeli friends the priorities of future. And you know what I get actually surprised with? That actually Israeli people my age, they have different priorities about what we have back in Morocco. They have priorities of walking together. Israel can walk alone. They have the stamina and they have the capacity to walk alone, Israel. But they want to walk with other countries, Bahrain included, Emirates, and Morocco, and inshallah in the future, more countries to be joined. Not only that, what tells me? There is no hate. It's a lot of fake media going on. As a Muslim, I had a chance to pray in Al-Aqsa, thank to Allah and thank to Sharaka, my mom. And I prayed there and I witnessed kids playing football that I've never seen on Al Jazeera. And speaking of Al Jazeera, a Jewish saint in Marrakesh has 700 years old, way older than Al Jazeera. So his Al Jazeera, or whoever invented that channel to tell me as a Moroccan youth about the Jews, whether in Israel or America or Morocco. So that is a beautiful start that I did with Sharaka in Israel. Now, going back to Morocco with the whole responsibility of carrying the truth, no more, no less. And I share it for the sake of my kids in the future, and I share it for the sake of my father that I lost when I was 6 years old, and he had Jewish friends in Morocco living in peace. I do it for the sake of past, and I do it for the sake of the future. Now, going back to Abraham Accord case in Morocco, I call it cute. And I always call it a sleeping baby that reborn and to wake up. A sleeping baby that was for years. Jews lived in Morocco 2,000 years. And Abraham Accord came back to ensure that relations that we had with Israel, with Jews and Israel. And to ensure the real priority is that humanity have to carry, and not negativity and not hate. Abraham Accord from Morocco is not only an agreement, it is not only a signing, but Abraham Accord helped my mom as a farmer to have irrigation system in a farm and have olive trees. It's a small detail that changed a lot of life in a family in Morocco. And if a family changed in Morocco, whether in an economic part or whether in an interfaith path, that is a change of a ground and a base. Sharaka is investing in that in a very unique model by just bringing people together. Maybe I have to take that word just, because it takes a lot. It takes way, it takes before, it takes during, and it takes after. Abraham Accord came so loudly to Morocco to not only ensure that Morocco has a big, strong roots and relations with Israel, but also to show the neighboring country that we can do it. And we can do it together, and we're so proud of that. It's a priceless gift, and we're so proud of that. Thank you.
So, Noam and Johnny, you're here with us And, Johnny, you're from a country that didn't sign an Abraham Accords with Israel yet. And Noam, you're from Israel. And I want you both to share with us what you believe is the current status of the Abraham Accords and the weight that the impact that they hold around the world is.
Well, sorry. Lebanon is yet to join the Abraham Accords. I believe they will in the future, hopefully. But I think one of the main issues that the Abraham Accords affected, it's not just the surrounding country of Israel that has yet to sign the Abraham Accords, but it also changed a lot of the ways that people speak about Israel in general. So for example, one of the major events in Lebanon that happened is the circulation of the word tatbi'. Tatbi' in Arabic means normalization. Yet in Arabic, that word is a really a bad influence where they say it in a bad way, that they're just normalizing this enemy state that shouldn't be normalized. Yet, in some sort of a way, that word made a shift of being a wrong word to say or to support, from changing it to much more acceptable discourse of situations where people realize that, wait a minute, what is the actual issues that we have with the state of Israel? When we go back to Lebanon, the question goes way beyond. It's like, okay, Lebanon and Israel are enemy states by definition, but there's no active war between the state of Lebanon and the state of Israel. And the major event that proves that for us is after Hezbollah decided to join the war on October 8th, 2023, while they also planned to do on October 7th like Hamas did, there was a split in the Lebanese community saying that we are against the war. Lebanon didn't choose to go to a war. They didn't vote to go to a war. The Lebanese army wasn't involved in the war. That's another proof that many people point on, saying this is why we can't let these terrorist groups control our lives anymore. Yes, there is some situations that needs to be solved between Israel and Lebanon, but once we sit on a table, we can actually get disagreements. And that really changed when we see politicians in Lebanon speaking in favor of some sort of normalization before they even say the word peace. We see news anchors and news reporters speaking about positively also what changed mainly in the Arabic media. The majority of them, they stopped saying the Zionist entity. I don't know if you noticed that. They stopped saying the Zionist entity and they started to say the state of Israel. They used also to say many times the occupation forces. Now they're saying the Israeli forces. They still didn't say the defense word yet. But there is changes. It changed a lot of things, and that's how you change minds when you talk with people, by changing the terminology and the way that you speak about a subject, which I believe it opened huge doors of discussions. You can't believe how many messages I get from Lebanese to speak about the situation. And I'm an Israeli. They can go to jail if they speak with me. I can go to jail myself in Lebanon, but that's a different situation. I have a 15 years arrest warrant. Maybe we should have disclosed that at the beginning. You're associated with a fugitive. I have 15 years of labor work in Lebanon. And if you've seen the burger that I ate this afternoon, I don't do labor work, maybe because of that. But this is the situation that we have to deal with. We are willing to pay this, like, small, I say it's a small price. But this is the end of it. This is where we're heading. This is where everyone now realizing that our future is not us having wars, is us having disagreements, but sitting on the same table and negotiating them and getting to an agreement.
We're moving to me. I understand. So I think I'll return back to my personal story. Like I said, until 2 years ago, I was an officer in the IDF, and some people like to emphasize the contrast. How, from an IDF officer, did you become the manager of a peace organization? It's supposed to be the complete. Some people think it's a complete opposite. For me, it's natural, but I'd like to emphasize that naturality. And so, like I said, I resigned from the army 2 years ago. And then I had an opportunity to leverage the opportunities of the Abraham Accords. Like finally, like my fellow friends here said, we had the whole Gulf open to Israeli to just roam there and interact with people and meet them. And I completely leveraged it and really, really enjoyed it. Until, unfortunately, October 7th happened. And on October 7th, like many other Israelis, I woke up from the sirens. And like many other Israeli reserved combatants, I wasn't called by the army. Everyone was, complete chaos was happening in Israel. But I did open my Twitter. And I saw, and I understood Arabic, and I saw the horrific views of hostages being taken to Gaza, and also the terrible views of what's happening in the Gaza envelope. So I got on my car the fastest as possible, and I drove like a crazy lunatic to the Gaza envelope. And on my way there, I understood something terrible happened. In the days up to the October 7th, we had a feeling that a normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia is just a couple of days away. And I was planning my trip to Riyadh and to Jeddah, and I even called a couple of Saudi people that I heard that had to do with my businesses. And the most terrible thing that came to my mind is my business trip is gone. I gave a slap to my face, and I reminded myself to put my ego aside, and I understood that something bigger is happening. But I did have like an aha moment in which I understood that what really happened here, what Sinwar, which thankfully is currently in a refrigerator in Israel, really wanted to do is cancel the possibility of peace between the countries. And in that moment, I understood that I didn't know what I'll see in a couple of moments, in a couple of minutes in the Gaza envelope, but I came to an inner conclusion that when I'll have the opportunity, I'll put everything aside and just work on the normalization with Saudi Arabia and with other Arab countries. As I understood, this is the only real revenge. And peace is the only way to move forward. So basically what you're seeing here is my revenge, and we're still working on it. But like I said, a couple of hours later, I saw the terrific scenes of unfortunately, I'll say equality. Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, children, elderly, and women and men were all butchered in that day. And that's what our enemies want to see. And we try to show a different kind of solution and a different kind of way forward.
And we're here tonight really sharing this way forward with you all. And one of the ways we do that is through a Holocaust education program. Now, my journey with Sharaka began on March of the Living last year. I have been involved the past 6 years in Holocaust education myself, and I found myself being invited to join a delegation of 50 Muslims from around the Middle East on a March of the Living delegation. We were in Auschwitz, walking the 3 kilometers from Auschwitz I to Auschwitz II, surrounded by Jewish people, communities from around the world, who were really passionate about remembering history in order to advocate for a better future. And I looked around me in a place that every single time I'm in Auschwitz, I get very emotional. And yet I was renewed with a sense of hope, because everyone I was with was someone that was Muslim from a country in the Middle East that was losing so much for being there on a personal level, friendships, business partners, getting so much hate on social media. And yet they were determined to make the future a brighter place, determined to learn about history, to learn about the horrors of the Holocaust, and then to walk forward with a group of 50 other people from different countries with different backgrounds, but each one of them on a passionate journey, on a journey to make sure that we as individuals create a brighter future. And that is the mission of Sharaka. And this is what we do. We send delegations from around the Middle East to Poland and to Germany to learn about the darkest days of society, but then to each make a vow to share this message in societies which are quite often miseducated on the Holocaust. And for each of us to then take a step forward and say, I am going to spread this message to my community, whether it's in Morocco, Bahrain, UAE, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India. We're going to share what happened in the past, and then we're going to work together to create a brighter future. And Fatima and Rashid, you both had the honor and the privilege of being in one of these delegations to Poland and Germany. Can you please share how this inspired you and the dialogue that you had back in your countries after being on these delegations, how it opened somebody else's heart and how you inspired them maybe?
So I had the honor to go and visit Auschwitz. As much as it was a hard experience, but I think it's important because in the Middle East, either we're not taught about the Holocaust or some people might know about it, but they think it's a lie or exaggeration by the Jews. So I thought it's important to be there, to learn about the history, because today, more than ever, especially after October 7, it's the time that we fight hate, we fight extremism, we fight radical Islam, radical in any form of religion. When we went there, it was very heavy feeling on myself. Being that place that experienced a lot of death, murder, a lot of people lost their life there, you can feel the heaviness on your heart. But I thought it's important to go and take Bahrainis and people from the Arab world and the Muslim world to go and learn. It's important for us to learn. And I think it's not only to fight anti-Semitism, it's also to fight Islamophobia. It's to fight hate that people are experiencing today. I think one of the stories, the conversation that I had back home is with one of my friends that was a very anti-Semitic person that hates the Jews, that hates Israel, as most Arabs and Muslims, to be honest. And we pray 5 times a day, and whenever she prays, she says, "May God curse the Jews and destroy Israel." But then 2 years later, we decided to host the first Israeli delegation in Bahrain. And I told her, come and meet Israelis. Most of the delegation were Israeli Arabs, Muslims, 2 of them were Christian, and I think around 4 were Israeli Jews. So I told her, no worries, you'll meet Muslims, Arabs, they will speak Arabic, just come. And she was like, no, I don't want to be seen with Israelis. I told her, at the end, we're in Bahrain. If you didn't benefit anything from this, you'll have a good dinner and you'll go back home. And she was like, okay, why not? So she decided to come, and by coincidence, she sat on the table next to the Jews. She didn't sit next to the Muslims or the Israeli Christians. She sat next to the Jews. So she spoke with them around the dinner, and once we were done, she came to me and she said, "Oh my God, Fatima." I said, "What's wrong? What happened?" And she said, "They're just like us." And I thought, what did you expect to see? Of course, they're just like us. And she said, no, you don't understand. The values we share are very similar. The family values, the religion values, our religions are very similar. And I said, okay, that's normal. And since then, I always make fun of her and say she's a recovered anti-Semitic person. And since that day, she stopped saying that prayer. And she became friends of that people she met, because she kept the identity aside. She knew the other, knew the human in front of her. And she asked about them, and she became friends of most of them. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful story, and every time I hear it, I kind of want to meet this friend more and more. Please God, one day. Rashid.
Beautiful. I have a very special story at Auschwitz in Krakow. First of all, Sharaka flew me on my birthday to witness that history, and it was in Ramadan. And for me, I don't think it was a coincidence, because a very important day of my life, witnessing something that you can't deny. And walking in the Auschwitz, and I saw the pictures of the women without hair. I swear to God, I saw my mom's eyes in one of the women's eyes. And if it's not about the Jews, it could happen to my mom. It could happen to my family. It could happen to everyone. Now, if it's a lie that has marketed in so many Arab countries, how can we deny this? And going back to Morocco with that cannot leave my mind. Months after that, I went to pilgrimage. I went to Saudi Arabia for Umrah. And I spent the last 10 days of Ramadan in the mosque, right in front of the Kaaba, which we called as Muslims i'tikaf. And the i'tikaf is less sleep, a lot of prayers. Going back to my country, we flew to Turkey, and there was a long layover in Turkey, and I went to a mosque in the airport, and I slept because I was tired. First of all, Umrah, as a man, you have to cut your hair. And I love my hair. It was a very hard decision for me. I cut my hair, and I went to that mosque. I look ugly. And I slept.
You can't look ugly.
Wait till you see my little hair. So I slept in that mosque, and this old gentleman came to me and he was like, son, wake up and pray for Hamas. And I was like, shall I tell him that I'm going to Israel in 3 days? And since I was brave enough to cut my hair, that I love a lot, I can be brave to tell him that I'm going to Israel. What worse could happen in a mosque? I told him, listen, I went to Ajafis, and this is what I saw. It's not only 6 million people. It's some people that we don't even know about. They lost their identity. Do you want that to happen? Whether to yourself or to me or to your family? And I'm going back to Israel because of the internal commitment that we built, not forced. From someone that hated Jews and hated Israel growing up. I'm going back to Israel because I see potential there, and I see walking together for harmony and peace. As I was talking, he was getting closer to me, but he said no word. He was very silent. And that silence for me, it was so loud, because that tells me that there is a peace in his heart that carries love and not hate. What all about is he's a follower of the media. And since he was silent and he's not saying anything about it, but he's willing to hear more about it, getting closer to me, that means he can change. And if that person change, we can change a lot. Or if we can click hearts and tell them about what we saw, then the responsibility is on them. We're not trying to force you to change, but here is what I saw in Poland. Here is what I saw in Israel. And here's my history with my father and grandfather, Jews in Morocco. Something that we just can't deny. And the story continues, of course, with opening conversations with people. Not every time it goes with silent. Sometimes it goes with insult, but we woke up smiling and happy. And so it is on our shoulders, it is in our heart, but we're so proud of that again to share. Thank you.
It really is. It's on every single one of us shoulders and hearts to continue sharing what happened in the Holocaust, and then to use this to create a better future. And Johnny, you're from a non-Jewish minority group in Israel. And I would love for you to share with the audience why you believe it's so important for non-Jewish groups to learn about the Holocaust.
First of all, till the age of 9, I didn't know anything about the Holocaust. I didn't know that there was a Holocaust. I basically didn't know anything till I had to flee Lebanon at the age of 9 because my dad was part of the South Lebanon Army, that basically a military of Lebanese national people, from Christians, Druze, some also Muslim, Shia and Sunni, that worked together with Israel to fight against the PLO back then that persecuted us in south of Lebanon during the 70s, and later on Hezbollah that started to control our area. After Israel's decision to leave Lebanon in May 2000, 100%, Hezbollah took over and threatened our lives. That's basically how I became a refugee from my homeland to now moving to my home, to Israel, that welcomed me and opened its border and now is basically protecting me. So at the age of 9, I went to a Jewish public school, and suddenly they took us at 10 a.m. in the morning to the middle of the school where like the ceremonies usually happens. We just stood there, and suddenly a siren started. I don't know if you've been to Israel during one of the national memorial days. So it's on the Holocaust Day and also on the eve and the morning of the National Memorial Day for the IDF fallen soldiers. They play a siren that just keeps on the same level. It's not like a military war siren, but it's a siren that goes up, stays for about a minute, 2 minutes, I think, the Holocaust Memorial Day, and then it shuts off. And suddenly, standing there with my classmates, hearing that noise, no one is saying anything to me. I still didn't even know to speak Hebrew at the time in a good way to understand what they're saying. And I think I felt a little bit of like something is happening because no one moved. They just stood still because this is what we do in these memorial 2 minutes. We just stand still and remember them. But then I've kind of started to explore. Then that same year, after I learned Hebrew, I read one of the testimonies of the children that survived the Holocaust, because we have also in Israel a children museum in Lochamei Getaot near Nahariya, which I read one of the testimonies of the children in the ceremony that my classrooms did. And suddenly it showed me a lot of things that I still don't know, where I want other people to understand. That's was one time that I really felt this kind of hopelessness in one side because I didn't know anything. And then the second time that it happened was after October 7th. 3 weeks after October 7th, although seeing all the devastating videos and photos of what Hamas did in south of Israel, my ex at the time, he had a birthday, and for his birthday, he wanted a 7-hour tour to Yad Vashem. He's Jewish, by the way. He is Jewish. Because he is fascinated by the Holocaust, he studied it, he's a teacher, and he really wants to do that thing that he didn't experience before, but on a solo tour with a tour guide, specifically from Yad Vashem, and his grandfather is also a Holocaust survivor, so we went to ask more about his history. But then it kind of clicked even more because it resonated with what we are going through in some sort of a point, not just in Israel, but I felt that it also happens to the Jewish community abroad. Because after October 7th, and I don't know if you are Jewish or you have Jewish friends, after October 7th, many of the Jewish communities living abroad suddenly felt alone. Their friends, that the Jews stood by their friends in the Women's March, in the Black Lives Matter, and other organizations, suddenly found themselves standing by themselves without having any one of their friends that they used to call friends for 20 years standing beside them, understanding what their community just went through in southern of Israel and Israel in general. I really felt at that moment, because once you enter Yad Vashem, there is a video in the beginning that shows you the life of Jews in Europe before the Holocaust, where you see religious Jews living in the shtetl, where you see non-religious Jews, where you see Jews that are now third-generation Christians. But once the Holocaust started, they all fell to the same category. Jews. No matter if your religion, or not. No matter what is your nationality. And that really connected me to what's going on abroad, where suddenly, no matter if you are supporting of Israel or not supporting of Israel, if you say, oh, look, Jewish, suddenly you are targeted and questioned about whether you support Israel or not. And that really made me go and speak much more about understanding each other no matter what. And we need to be also proud of our identity. We can't allow Jews to hide their Jewishness, which happened after October 7th. I know families that took their mezuzahs out of their homes in Boston because their friends were targeted. And that's something that really kind of made me continue on advocating for humanity, because we went through this huge dehumanization. And that was the outcome at the end of the day of the Holocaust, and we can't let that happen again. This is basically a lot of my education that is to show the humanity of people, that no matter what they believe in, at the end of the day, he have the right to believe in that. And the right is there of his like existential right of living.
Thank you, Johnny. Such empowering words. Noam, given your military background, I want you to share with us how you think Holocaust education can be used as a tool for de-radicalization.
I think we're on a panel, so this is supposed to be spontaneous. So I'd also like to at least share a point of view. My grandmother, tomorrow is her 90th birthday, which I'm very sorry I'm not with her, but it's for being with you, so it's a good enough reason. She's a Holocaust survivor, and I think the comparison is incorrect. There are, I brought it up by myself, a couple of similarities, but I do think that it's important to say, at least from my point of view, that of course the comparison is very, very different. And also as a Jewish Israeli, we understand it, although we are in this turbulent times and we feel so hard, so strong emotions. That's just a personal opinion. But I'll go back to your question, Alisa. But before I answer it, I'd like to continue my story, because after October 7th happened, as a reserve combat officer, we continued into Gaza, and most of our focus was on operations to look for the hostages, because that was our most important goal. And one of the operations happened in a hospital, in one of the major hospitals. And although we believed our activity and purpose is ethical and moral and very, very important, going into a hospital as a soldier, it doesn't feel correct. So the first thing we did, of course, was take out all the civilians. But then we didn't understand we need to go into the hospital and get the intel from inside, because we had intel that there is or hostages or intel about the hostages inside the hospital. And while we were searching the hospital, something pretty shocking occurred. I was getting into the office of the head of the hospital, of the major. Thank you, Rashid. You'll help me with this. Just this. Thank you.
We're just combining, working together.
So I was getting into the office of the head of the hospital, and on his desk, I unfortunately found this book. And here I have Arabic speakers, and I'm an Arabic speaker, but if in the crowd people can see, it's the Protocols of the Elderly of Zion, Protocolat Hakma Sahyun, and it was still on. It was like fresh on his desk with a bookmark in the middle, and that completely shocked me and terrified me and made me feel bad, because it's not that we didn't know or hear about radicalization in Gaza, but understanding that this is what a Gazan doctor does ahead of a hospital, reading an anti-Semitic book, which in some ways inspired what we see in the future in the sources of the Nazi ideology. It was terrifying and very, very sad. And instead of investing his time in medicine and treating his own people, I won't say he was reading it 24/7, but this was some of his time. And that was heartbreaking. And I want to bring it back to our Holocaust education, because, I'm sure the Dallas Holocaust Museum asks themselves the same questions that we ask ourselves. How do you change people? How do you de-radicalize? It's such a hard question. And I'm not saying that we have the answer. But I want to return to a moment back to Fatima and Rashid's answers. Fatima about her friend who de-radicalized. She's a recovered anti-Semite. Or that person that Rashid met and his friends around him, that their eyes opened. And our conclusion in Sharaka, what we believe, our theory of change, is that the only way nowadays, that the days are, news are so rapid, so fast, the only way to truly change someone is by letting him experience it slowly, meeting people, having conversations. By the way, it's vice versa. It's Arabs to Jews, but also Jews to Arabs. Jews going to the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco and seeing beautiful cultures and amazing initiatives happening in those countries. It's eye-opening and life-changing. So we see that as our theory of change. I do want to emphasize that we don't choose anyone to bring to our delegations. We bring people who are impactful. If you'll do a selfie with the three of these guys in the end of this event, you'll have hundreds of thousands of followers in your Instagram because they're famous and they impact their societies. So we try to choose the most impactful people from societies, be it politicians or religious leaders or cultural leaders or academians, and give them that eye-opening experience of dialogue happening on the ground, and then letting them through the modern society, social media, and technology to share their voices to the largest crowd that's possible. That's how we think de-radicalization can start.
So we've just spoken about how we use the past as a tool to really create a brighter future. And now, Fatma and Rashid, I would love for you to share with us, what do you think the future of the Abraham Accords looks like for your respective countries?
I'll be short so we can go to more questions. For my country specifically, I hope we get to that point that there is no enemies targeting Bahrain, more security, economy-wise, I hope the economy thrive more and more. But what I hope for the Abraham Accords, for sure, more countries joining, because at the end it will not benefit Bahrain and Israel only. It will benefit the whole Middle East, including the Palestinians. And hopefully, Abraham Accord 2.0, Saudi Arabia joins and everything changes, and hopefully peace in the Middle East for the Israelis, Palestinians, and everyone. Thank you.
Well, it's not a secret for everyone that if you travel to North Africa, you can definitely see the difference after the Abraham Accord. And I said North Africa because we think about Middle East as, of course, as a part, but also there's North African. We're the Arabs, Muslims, where Jews lived before, for 1,000 years. Now, the future Abraham Accord, there's already the future. The fruits of Abraham Accord already reflected in the reality. And in Morocco's case, it went through different levels immediately to the level of economy and a level of culture, a level of tourism, and a level of security. And so for Abraham Accord's case, as I mentioned before, we don't want it to stay in only one place there. The Abraham Accord, we would like to share that model as much as we can with people and with nations that they're ready to serve humanity and not be selfish. Because there are so many countries that they try to walk alone and selfish. But we can't do that. Israel and Morocco example is a great model, unique, and I can assure you, even the speech of other countries in North Africa, it changed. It changed because they saw result, and it changed from the hate to recognizing the history. And hopefully, from my personal commitment, we can advance that in North Africa, and we have more signing of Abraham Accord in North Africa, inshallah.
Please God. Johnny, how have the Abraham Accords influenced the broader political dynamics in the region, specifically regarding Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the big elephant in the room, Iran?
That's a fantastic question, and I'll try to answer it really shortly. Welcome to Middle East 101. What basically we all, like Noam said, and I think also Fatma and Rashid mentioned it, Saudi Arabia was supposed, or I think already, to be in the middle of an Abraham Accords 2.0, where October 7th was a pause to that. That was Hamas's mission, that mainly Hamas didn't act just for themselves. They were funded, given weapons and training to infiltrate Israel by the Islamic Republic of Iran. So Iran is a key factor in that matter, where they are also funding Hezbollah, that is continuing to harm Israel, where they're funding the Houthis that are in Yemen, that are continuing to threaten to fire at Israel, where they also still threatening to stop shipments of goods from the sea. This is something that we're still facing, while after October 7th, the Middle East has changed drastically. This war affected everything that is going on, mainly also affected the Islamic Republic of Iran, also Turkey. I remember one tweet that was written on the 10th of October 2023 from someone that is anonymous, like no one knows who he is. But suddenly his tweet was reshared again after the Assad regime has fallen. He said Yahya Sinwar might have brought the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. Everyone in the comments back then were like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't know anything, and they were like just talking rubbish. But I think it proved that it did. It affected, because when Hezbollah was weakened, also the Assad regime was weakened. When the Islamic Republic of Iran that was funding Syria, it was also affecting what's going on in Syria. That's how Turkey was able also to join in and basically fund the rebels. There are some of them connected to Al-Qaeda and other Islamic and Islamistic terrorist groups that are also now a threat to what could happen in the region. So now I believe that once Saudi Arabia would join the Abraham Accords and create this new dynamic that will exclude the Islamic Republic of Iran even more than it is now, it could drastically change the difference of other dynamics in other territories. We still don't know what's going to happen in Syria. That's something that could be a real factor. The rebels, the head of the rebels now, although I don't really trust him, he said that we don't have an issue with Israel. That's something that no one expected to happen. Also in Lebanon, the new government is considered to be anti-Hezbollah, anti-Islamic Republic of Iran involvement in Lebanon. That also another factor that could have changed that reality towards a bigger, wider normalization throughout the Middle East and north of Africa. By the way, Israel is in Asia, so it's a continental thing. But yeah, this is like hopeful. This was like a short kind of preview of hopefully what this domino effect could lead to. I'm really optimistic for the fact Lebanon almost signed a peace agreement with Israel on the 17th of May, 1983, when we had the president in Lebanon that was Amin Gemayel. In the US, that were the moderators, the kind of in between was the Reagan administration. In Israel, it was Yitzhak Shamir, Menachem Begin. It was Menachem Begin, they switched in the middle. Menachem Begin was the prime minister, and there is an agreement that unfortunately wasn't signed by Lebanon because the Assad regime threatened the Lebanese president, if you sign it, you're gonna be killed like your brother a year ago. That was also a president and wanted to make peace with Israel. But this is something that I see in the future where it's going to change drastically.
I just want to remind the audience that if you have a question, you can hold up your placard and we're going to get to them very shortly. But in the meantime, Noam, I'm going to ask you a question that in itself could be a whole entire panel. So I'm warning you. The United States has historically been very involved in negotiating peace agreements. And I want to know your opinion on the role of the United States in the region and how they can help strengthen the Abraham Accords.
I'll also be very concise and short. I'll try to do my best. And I'll talk from my perspective, but I think I'm trying to share an Abraham Accordish or Middle Eastern perspective, at least from our spectrum of ideas and ideologies, but you can correct me if I'm wrong later. We as Middle Easterns, we see the American intervention as a positive thing. That's how we see it. We won't get into American domestic politics, but isolationists against imperialists. We have this spectrum today, but we understand that without a great American push towards these peace agreements, it won't happen. And I think different administrations, we saw decades without peace happening in any ways, without it going forward. And in some years, again, we're apolitical and don't support any party that or other party, but we do think that while America leverages its power in the Middle East to push forward these peace agreements, it can happen. So from our perspective, it has to happen in a way of dialogue with the Arab countries and the Jewish state. But we do see it as a positive thing. In the end, we look on America as a beacon of light for the world. This is how we see it. And if I'll say one last word about it from an organizational perspective, this is why we invest some of our time here. 80% of our time is on programs in the Middle East, but we understand that 20% to 30% of our time has to be in talking with American audiences. We've just been yesterday in Imam Marzouk's mosque. We went to churches and to synagogues and talked with political officials, because we understand that when America pushes for peace in the Middle East, it happens. And we call for all Americans to, and that's why it's so important for us to emphasize the importance of the Abraham Accords. We said it again and again and again from our perspective, because we believe this is the only way for peace in the Middle East, and also for stability and prosperity in America. That's our organizational perspective. So that's my take about that.
So I want to take a moment and just kind of solidify the projects that Sharaka does, and how this makes an impact, an ever-growing impact in the Middle East. Now, at the end of the day, Sharaka uses many different innovative technologies and different things that our current situation, our current world can do to amplify what we do to the world. We use people that have massive followings on social media to bring them on our delegations, to teach them about the Holocaust, to introduce them to a society that they never thought they would be introduced to. And then we work with them on projects in their countries, to their societies, to their followings, to share this message with the world. And Fatma, if you can share with the audience one of those projects that you helped work on and the impact it made after.
Of course. One of the projects was a Bahraini delegate. Sorry. She was one of the first actually to go on those delegations to Poland. And because she's a teacher and she's a mom of two, she had this idea that she wanted to do an illustration book with a story, a simple story that kids can understand the Holocaust and the result at the end, that this is the result of hate and extremism. So she done this book because she don't want her kids to grow up hateful, having extremism mindset. And I think this is important, because as much as we do in Sharaka, we most of our projects are for adults or university students. There is the people that we bring think about the young ones also. Yeah.
And I want to add to that, and I want to show one of the projects that I'm currently working on at this moment. We have one of our participants from Pakistan, and he has a following of 200,000 people who currently live in Pakistan. He, 3 months ago, finished his delegations with Sharaka. He was already in Poland and Germany, and 3 months ago, he attended the Holocaust education program in Israel, where we do a 2-day seminar at Yad Vashem. Now, after he returned to Pakistan, he called me, and he said, Elisa, we have to find a way for me to educate my society on what happened during the Holocaust. He's like, I walk around, and on every street corner, I see Mein Kampf. People here do not understand what happened, and I saw it with my own eyes. I have to make sure that people do not forget. And since then, he shares every single week to his following who live in Pakistan what happened during the Holocaust. He writes blogs, he shares his stories, and he shares how it impacted him. He met with Holocaust survivors, and currently, right as we speak, he is working on opening a website where he can share these stories with as many people as possible, because he became determined to go back to his country and to be our voice. And that is what Sharaka is all about. It's amplifying this voice to as many people as possible. And right now, we're here today in Dallas because it's so important for us to share this message of hope with as many people as possible. You know, you turn on the TV and you see so many people just trying to divide between us. You see people causing hatred and disputes and just arguing all the time. And yet here we are, people with 5 different voices, 5 different backgrounds, but we're here to promote dialogue. We're here to promote coexistence and tolerance and love and acceptance. And by learning about each other's histories, we truly can pave the way for a better future. And so you, now that you've each listened to this little bit of light, we really call upon you to help us share this message of light with as many people as possible. To follow Sharaka, to follow our initiatives. You can find us on social media, you can find our website, and really to advocate for a better future as well. And if you have any questions about the organization, you can also ask, and we're happy to answer them here. And now I'm going to go to questions from the audience. So we touched on this a little earlier about Al Jazeera and the role that they can play in really just sharing this hate with the world. And I want to ask you, how can the media shift the public attitudes about fostering cooperation and coexistence in the Middle East? And what is your beliefs? And Fatima, I'm putting this question to you. What is your belief that it's currently hindering the possibility of collaboration and coexistence in the Middle East?
I think with media, it's a hard question because the media affects everyone, so directly or indirectly. I spoke in Arabic, but I said one word in Arabic, but anyway. I always advise people to choose their information. Like, don't, watch everything. Watch an Israeli channel, a Palestinian newspaper, a Saudi newspaper. Examine the information that you get. Because at the end, all of them will have some truth. Some of them might have really facts. That's why I said Saudi, because I always advise people to watch Al Arabiya channel. Al Arabiya channel is the most trusted. Don't watch Al Jazeera at all. Don't think about it. Even though Al Jazeera English gives another narrative than the Arabic one. If you understand both languages, you'll find it very different narrative. But yeah.
Thank you. Rashid, you've used your voice in the past to really speak up against anti-Semitism. And I'm interested to know your opinion about how the individual can fight against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia.
Well, you know, it's not a secret for everyone that if an individual effort comes, whether on social media or events or in-person meetings, that also can says a lot, whether about your personality, that what you believe, but also about like what the collective efforts that you're looking for. And for me, I think as an individual, you can definitely start with very, very, very small events. And I earlier this morning I mentioned something about the White House because people, whenever they see me in the US, they go like, "Have you been to the White House? Have you been to the White House?" Although I see White House everywhere, which symbolizes the decisions. This is the White House. When I meet my mom and talk about this, that's the White House. And for me, it's the individual effort matters a lot. If we are gonna build a strong ground and base of a better future, it comes from the individual. You can use social media, as what we do. You can talk to your friends, your colleagues. You can talk to your enemies in person, and that can change us a lot. The more important thing, it doesn't stop there, is that you want to invite people to see it with their eyes, individual. And I'm an individual. I went and I see it with my eyes. And there's so many Americans with their passports, with a beautiful privilege. Why don't you just travel and see it in person? I'm an African. It's hard for me to travel. So, but I did when I went there and I see the reality. And sorry for being too long, but this, I always believe in individual effort comes to a collective effort.
Thank you, and it's very true. Noam, part of the larger purpose of the Abraham Accords is economic advancement. For example, trade, travel, tourism, and infrastructure. And I want to know your opinion on if you have seen the economic growth driven by the Abraham Accords, or do you think that it's been delayed or paused since October 7th?
Thank you. First of all, like I said, as an individual, I felt it. Like it opened, and some things that I really like. I'll start with the individual anecdotes, but then I'll go to a bit more to the macro. Something that I liked about our panels is that a lot of times, I'm not sure it was said this time, but a lot of times the Arabs share that for them they opened a new region was open for them. For Fatima, Israel, and Morocco, suddenly it came to her thought, and Johnny could go to the UAE, and Rashid all the way to Israel. So and I also tell it about myself. I had the opportunity to go to these countries and to do business with people that I really felt it in the most individual way as possible. But more than that, in a macro perspective, the accords have surely and statistically brought trade of hundreds of millions of dollars between the countries. And a fact that I think, which is almost mind-blowing, is even during the war and after the war begun, and while it was happening, the trade didn't decrease, but increased. And one of the most significant facts about this is the flights. One of the only countries who continued to fly during, maybe in October 7th, they stopped for a couple of hours, but the only countries that didn't stop flying to Israel back and forth was the UAE. And that shows us, and by the way, above Saudi Arabia. MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, he approved, I think, a couple of months before it was part of the preparations for a possible normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, was his approval that Israelis can fly above Saudi Arabia. And we see these flights continuing with business and trade and tourism. So we feel it from a personal perspective to a macro perspective. And I think if I can say just one more word about that, we understand, a couple of days ago, Johnny and me, we were in Miami. And a Jewish businessman told us there that it's all about business. It's all about money. And I completely differ. I think there are two very important vectors at least in the Middle East. I don't know about the Western world, but at least in the Middle East. One vector is the economical vector, which is going well and hopefully will improve. But it is important to emphasize also the ideological vector. Because people in the West look at us in the Middle East and they say, okay, let's just spend money and things will be solved. But Sinwar and Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood had billions of dollars of assets around the Western world and inside Gaza, and they decided in a moment to destroy it. So I think the economical vector is very, very important, and thank God there's improvement. And like Rashid recognized and told about his mom with the irrigation system in Morocco, and we feel it more and more happening, and it is part of the pathway. But we also need really to emphasize and think and give our thoughts about the ideological vector and how, and I think that's why we're here, and that's why the Holocaust is important, how I brought a Holocaust into an economical question, but it is an important part of the discourse, because de-radicalizing ideologies is a vital part of moving forward in any kind of solution for the Middle East.
Thank you. Fatma, this question is something that's come up pretty much every time we do a panel at Sharaka. And the question is, does Sharaka ever create opportunities for Israelis, Arabs, and Palestinians to share their stories together in dialogue?
Of course. In Sharaka, we try to include Palestinians as much as we can, but at the same time, we reject them joining many of the times. I'll tell you why. The Palestinians that worked with us, most of them either live abroad and their whole family live abroad. One of them was a girl from Gaza, but she lives in Dubai and her family is all around the world. So she feels safe to speak up. There is another guy living in Europe. He feels safe to speak up. One time we had a Palestinian professor. He came from the West Bank, and he's a famous professor. And he joined us in the March of the Living in the first time. When he went back to his home, they burned his car. As a warning, why did you go with the Israelis, of course? Unfortunately, Palestinians still living in West Bank or even Gaza, it's hard for them. It's a life-threatening situation if they're seen with us, with the Israelis. And unfortunately, I met a lot of Palestinians when I was in Israel. Most of them were from West Bank. So many of them messaged me on Instagram. They tell me, what you're doing, that's what we want. We want peace, and we applaud what you're doing. But we can't be seen. One of them was actually in Jerusalem when my friend wanted to take a video of him, and he was like, no, I live in West Bank. Of course, I have to go through checkpoints, and my life is hard, and we all understand that. But I want peace. I don't want to kill anyone, and I don't want to be killed. So continue what you're doing, but I can't be in video and say that, because I could be threatened, my life could be taken, or even my family's. So unfortunately, even Iraqis wanted to join our mission, and we had to reject them. We had to tell them, no, we can't let you be part of this mission. And why is that? Because in Iraq, if they're seen dealing with any Israeli, there is a death penalty directly by law. So we can't put people's life on the line, you know? So that's unfortunately why we can't let any Palestinian be part of this, because at the end, we care about the people more than anything. And that's the reality, unfortunately.
I think I have to share a short comment about that. Because people, we were just surprised to hear about maybe disinformation or lack of knowledge of part of the Palestinian society. Everyone heard about Hamas, and I think everyone understands that Hamas is a radical terrorist organization, and we don't need to emphasize that. But also the moderate part of the Palestinian society, which is the Palestinian Authority, at least they are supposed to be the leaders. Until a couple of days ago, they still had a law which is called, which we call in Israel, we call it pay to slay. That means the amount of Jews you kill is the amount of payment you get by the Palestinian Authority. This was a law that went for decades. And again, I won't get into American domestic politics, but we do thank the current administration for saying, no, this Palestinian Authority won't get any more funding until this law is canceled. And I want to emphasize that because this is an environment that happens in the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. If a law of pay to slay happened until a couple of days ago, that shows that unfortunately the current situation in the Palestinian society is that moderate voices still don't have the social credit to be part of this discourse, which is an unfortunate fact that we feel. We really want to have a dialogue of normalization, of being together and asking how can we expand agreements. But I think that fact about the moderate part of the Palestinian society is a point that is important to emphasize because sometimes people don't know it.
Johnny, you spend a lot of your time these days on campuses across the US, really advocating for your story and for minority groups in Israel and for representing those minority rights, just like you did here with us this evening. And so my question for you is, how do you inspire young people, the next generation, and what is your wish for them to get their news? How do you want them to be advocates? How do you want them to understand that a lot of their social media feed is feeding them misinformation?
Oh, that's a few-layer question. First of all, I've been going to college campuses in the U.S. and Europe since 2016, where I share a lot of my personal story moving from Lebanon to Israel. In 2017, I had the privilege to create the first of its kind group of non-Jewish Israeli citizens that were Christians, Muslims, Druze, and Bedouins. We flew together also to campuses to share this mosaic of different identities and religions that live in Israel for us to share our own opinions and how our life is in this Jewish and democratic state. Where a lot of us, and that was my most important thing, would be also active in our own communities in Israel. It's not just like we're going to travel abroad and speak about Israel in general. No, we had a Druze activist that she was active for women encouragement and advancement in the Druze community. We had a Bedouin that mainly supported and encouraged the situation of what's going on with the Bedouins in south of Israel, where there's many communities that haven't been settled yet, and there's a lot of disputes between the Israeli government and those communities. I was speaking about my own community, the Lebanese community that came to Israel, and some issues that also weren't resolved with the government. That something that we said in Israel, we will fight for our communities, but abroad we will fight for our country. This is our story, because if Israel is affected, we are affected no matter what happens as Israeli citizens. And where when we go to speak with these students, we share them with them first and foremost, in my opinion, a message of hope, and not coexistence, but shared life of how we actually do it on the ground. Where a lot of the misinformation that goes against Israel is about my life in Israel as non-Jew, where they say I'm living in this oppressed country where I don't have my rights. So I always add the layer of me being gay. I'm like, okay, now let's tighten it up a little bit even more, and bring that to the mix. But this is basically how I try to do that, by sharing these personal stories, but also encouraging people to get to know more the facts. Don't take everything that I say as granted. Go and search for more, and then get back to me and ask me the difficult questions that you find. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, Israel is as normal as any other country in the world. Yes, although we had wars. All of countries had wars at one point. Remember that we are 75 years old since Israel was reestablished in 1948. Talking about its independence. Wow, that was the Arabist thing that I've did. The independence. But this is our sharing of hope and sharing of shared life and living together, where we always encourage people to just ask more, but respect each other. That's the key of respecting each other and learning more about the issue.
Thank you. You know, the last question that we always ask is, what gives you hope for the future? And I kind of just want to share with all of you that what gives me hope for the future as a Jewish person living in Israel is each and every one of these voices. And it's each of the voices that Sharaka has the honor of working with, because these are people that are risking so much, but honestly, they're just risking it to share their own truth. And they're not sharing anything we ask them. They're coming to their countries, they're opening their eyes, they're seeing something themselves, and then they are becoming advocates. And that's what gives me hope. And what gives me hope is each and every one of you that is taking time out of your busy lives, of your busy days, to come here and to listen to this message of hope. So I thank you so very much for joining us this evening. We hope this shed some more light on peace negotiations in the Middle East. And we appreciate you so very much for coming and for sharing this message with us, and hopefully with as many more people as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you also to the Dallas Holocaust Museum. It was an amazing opportunity for us, huge privilege.
Now we can see you, finally. We were basically blind.